From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan alongside my partner, Luigi, the Professor, Rosa Bianca. What's going on today, Lou?
Matt, how are you, partner? Today we're in for a real treat. There was one very valuable lesson that everyone's going to take away from this episode. I'm not going to share it just yet. I'm going to keep it in my back pocket because the person we have who's going to teach us this lesson is a really interesting fella in his own mind. So, Erik Fogg, author, podcaster, small businessman, quasi-hobbyist politician.
Sure.
Erik Fogg, welcome to the Liquid Lunch Project, my friend. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm pumped to be here. I love your show. It was just so cool. You guys actually invited me to join it rather than just listen to it. Yeah, we're gonna have a blast.
Oh man, you really know how to pull at our heartstrings.
It's true. Actually, I think I'm gonna try to drop as like much micro wisdom as I can as we go through here. But I actually think that authenticity and vulnerability are the keys to developing like real love and like real loyalty among a team. And so I think like one of the things I've been willing to do, like even through the hipster age, is just be willing to be like very open about my enthusiasm for a person or what they're doing. And I've never been the guy who plays it cool. I've never been the guy who like waits 2 days to text you after a date. I've always been like, hey man, I'm really excited about this. Let's go. And it turns out people really like that. People don't get enough love and appreciation out there. And if you're like willing to share what you authentically feel, it goes a long way.
Erik, you're a highly educated individual, MIT grad, super smart fella, smartest guy in this room right now. How does a highly educated guy remain that sensibility? How do you remain nice? And how do you maintain that enthusiasm for everything you do?
I happen to think that knowing a lot about stuff, right, which is what being educated is. There's certain stuff that you know a lot about. And I think it can send you down two paths. Because what I happen to study a lot of before getting into tech was political science. And so I know a lot about political science, and I know a fair bit about economics and stuff like that. I know a lot of people who end up believing that because they are, quote, educated, that they know more about, or that they are like superior to other people who don't have that education. I come from a Rust Belt town. I actually ended up working in the Rust Belt quite a bit afterward. And I think there's another path. There should be another path. And I think with the right mindset, you take this other path when you do learn a lot about a thing. And again, the thing I learned a lot about was political science, which is you realize, holy simoleons, before I got this education in political science, I didn't know anything about it. There is so much to know about just this little tiny sliver in the world of political science. And all these other people around me know all sorts of stuff around slivers that I have no idea about. And that's the thing I think that knowing that like has me excited about meeting just about anyone, because everyone's got this awesome story where they've learned a lot about a thing. And I don't know anything about it. And so I think I really do think like when you learn a lot about a thing, it can teach you not to be arrogant, but to be humble and to realize how much there is to know about all sorts of other things that you don't know and how deep that can go.
On the subject of politics, so America was at one point a very centrist nation. And I think this transition occurred with the onset of the internet. Prior to the internet, the distinctions between the Democratic and Republican Party were, forgive the pun, political, right?
Yeah.
There really wasn't a huge distance between their philosophies. But with the internet and being open to French ideas and socialist ideas, and the world offers a lot of different spectrums. So maybe our spectrum went from between 4 and 6. Now it's between 1 and 9. Erik, what is the status quo of American politics today?
I think the best way I can put it is balkanization. So one of the reasons we had balkanization this is a political science term. The balkanization is it means a fracturing into small little groups, little tribes. It still looks like we have two tribes because we have a Republican Party and Democratic Party, but there's a lot of infighting that's going on within these parties that there wasn't before. So it's not just that the parties fight with each other, it's that within the parties there's a lot of fighting. Like if you're a Bernie bro, you know what that fighting looks like in the Democratic Party. You're very frustrated with the party right now because the party isn't following a Sanders style Democratic socialist agenda. If you're a never Trumper and they exist, they're just out of power in the Republican Party right now. They're all like frothing at the mouth, right? The people left who support, anywhere from George Herbert Walker Bush to Mitt Romney to George W. Bush, all of those beliefs and doctrines are out of fashion in the Republican Party right now, but people still believe them. And so this balkanization occurred, like the internet caused balkanization to occur because what we can do is we can, rather than have to, like in a bowling alley or a church or whatever was our form of social connectivity before, rather than have to just deal with people who had different points of view than us and hear them out and be polite to them, we can choose on the internet, we can choose who we associate with based on what we believe. And so we can actually, so it just causes us, if you like model people like, just like little dots bumping around, rather than bumping into a lot of people who disagree with you, you end up like gravitating naturally towards people who do agree with you, and you all reinforce each other. And it's a big echo chamber, right? And the algorithms of social media are the biggest drivers of this. And so it's not that we've actually just split into two groups, it's that we split into like 7. And those 7 groups have gotten a little more solidified in their identity, even if they're not solid in their belief system. We could talk all day about this, but that's what I think the status quo is. This is like balkanized group of tribes that are all like, kind of banging against each other and trying to fight for dominance.
Erik, let's take it a step further. But why should I not listen to your beliefs? You should listen to my beliefs, and we can agree to disagree, but just be tolerant of each other. I mean, I'm fiscally conservative, right? As a Catholic, I don't agree with abortion. You may disagree with that. You may agree with that. But you shouldn't burn down my house because you disagree with it, right? There has to be a level of civility that enters the political discourse.
I think at the end of the day, it's game theory. And this is something I learned a lot. This is from my political science lens, is why do sort of like, we asked the question, like, why do people act the way they do? Why did we shift to this warfighter mindset? Because I agree with you, the ultimately incivility serves nobody, right? Incivility hurts us all. The warfighter mindset does not, if you looked back on your, if you were in charge of the party, right, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the way that, as C-suite person is in charge of a business, and you look back on your strategy of warfighting over the past 20 years, has it led to you significantly advancing political priorities? No, it's not, right? We've led to actually deadlock. But there's an effed up, and so as individuals, we have to think about that as well. There's an effed up game theory problem where it's a lot like it's actually mostly a prisoner's dilemma issue, where do you cooperate or do you defect? Defect is warfighting, cooperate is like be civil and find a way to talk and get along. And there's like two issues driving the defector strategy right now. One of them is momentum. So we've established momentum, and if you're trying to cooperate, the way the prisoner's dilemma works, if you're trying to cooperate when other people are defecting, you get hosed. But the other one that's driving the defector mindset, the warfighter mindset, is the warfighter mindset. And this is the book I wrote in 2014 called Wedged. The warfighter mindset, given the fractioning of our political discourse, given balkanization of media sources and social media, what it is it's a marketing tactic. So ultimately, you have groups, whether they're a political party or an individual politician or an NGO, like PETA, for example, they do a great job being controversial, and this gets them funded. I could write a whole book about it, and I did. And so to keep it brief, the marketing strategy for these organizations is to inspire rage and fear, because what that does is it gets you to act using the instinctual part of your brain that when you're scrolling through social media, what are you going to click? You're going to click the thing that makes you angry. And therefore, you're going to reinforce that anger because it's the thing that happens to work when you otherwise might scroll something by that's more reasonable. And so there's actually there is a strong incentive for organizations who need to survive, political parties, NGOs, advocacy groups, stuff like that, to make us angry. And the ones that don't, they just don't get funded and they die. And so the underlying structure of how we consume information has to change for us to be able to break out of this.
Erik, I think that was the most elegant explanation on the political discourse in America today. So thank you.
Thanks.
But we could talk politics all day long. However, it doesn't pay the bills. We need to make money.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about ProdPerfect. And here's a lesson for today. Please share with us the distinction, the trials, the tribulations of running a business with venture-backed funding versus the old school American bootstrapping.
I actually have to talk about that distinction a lot because I mentor a lot of young entrepreneurs, and they ask the question, should I go venture-backed or not? And the answer, of course, is it depends. So what ProdPerfect does is we're a tech company that builds software that autonomously tests other software. So normally, the way you test software is if you want to test it automatically, what you do is you write custom code that tests your software, right? You look at your software, you go, okay, these are the tests I'm going to write. I'm going to make sure that checkout works. I'm going to make sure that login works. And so you write code that pretends to be a user. Great. Problem is this takes about like 20 to 25% of a engineering team's time to write and manage these tests. So we've built software that does this autonomously and allows engineers to get back to engineering. And our software tests your software for you. So that's what we do. Why did we choose the venture-backed route? I'll start with that. It's because it turns out this technology is incredibly difficult to build, and we've gone through this like very creative path of sort of selling it before it was fully autonomous. We had people in the background kind of propping it up. It's actually a very common path for a lot of especially like AI type startups like this. Is the AI takes time to learn, and so you need people to prop it up. So the reason we went venture backed is we just needed a lot of money because we needed a lot of engineers before this product was going to be fully viable. So the venture backed mode of running a business is you're losing money every month, which is terrifying, right? You've got a big war chest. You've got, investor capital. You sold, 20 to 30% of your company through a couple rounds. So your ownership stake drops. Like right now, the people who were originally there own 58% of our company right now. Yeah, so you sell parts of your company and you have a big war chest of millions of dollars and you're spending it every month. And what's interesting, the thing that's different about this from a bootstrap company, which is where I used to work when I was working in the Rust Belt, they had to be profitable every month. We don't want to be profitable every month. We don't want to move towards profitability yet, because what the investors want when you take on venture capital money, what the investors want is for you to grow as fast as possible. So they're like, take that money and spend it. Hire more salespeople, acquire more customers faster, because what they're looking for is, momentum, the ability to get to profitability at some point. So what you establish as a venture-backed company is not company profitability, but unit profitability of an individual customer. You want to show that each individual customer is profitable, and then you want to acquire as many of them as fast as possible, because someone else is coming to eat your lunch. And even if your base costs are very high and growing, as long as you've got profitable customers who stick around, that money will come back in the long term. So we call this a J curve. What you're doing is you're constantly going on a J curve where you're burning money now to create profitability so your money in the bank goes down, and then it starts bottoming out, and then it starts going up, but it goes up faster than if you had tried to be profitable the whole time. So why wouldn't everybody do this? It's because once you start selling your company, you start losing control, right? You have to, you accept that your company is run by a board of people who are all stakeholders in the business. And so you have to find a good venture capitalist, someone who's really going to be part of your team. And there's pressure to go fast. You can't take it slow. And if things go badly, you're going to run out of money and your company's gone. Venture backed was the right thing for us. For a bootstrap company, discipline is the name of the game, right? So you invest a lot more in being efficient. You will invest a lot more in not spending unnecessarily. Whereas what's interesting is that there's an efficiency in inefficiency. I don't know a better way to put it, in venture-backed companies where, yeah, you're spending more than you need to get something done, but the time investment required by the company to figure out how to spend less on this thing is too much, because each month you're already burning a ton of money. So it makes sense to spend a little bit incrementally more to get you to go faster, because if you go faster, you spend less. And so it's not so much about how much you spent this month, it's how much you spend in order to achieve your next growth objective. And so overspending a little bit in order to get time gives you a net benefit. So it is a like weirdly undisciplined kind of motion where you're just, where you solve problems by throwing money at them as fast as possible. You experiment quickly. And when I was working in factories, our focus was always stability, right? We need predictability month over month because we need to, for example, sell milk. I worked at milk plants. We need to sell milk in order to pay our bills. And we need to spend less than we make in revenue in order to pay those bills, or else we will go broke. Or we have to take on loans, which become a problem in the future. And so the focus was always, don't move too fast, don't take on too many risks, but do make sure that you are dropping make sure that you are incrementally but predictably and without spending too much, either growing your revenue or decreasing your costs.
Now, Eric, what happens in that rare occasion when that J curve becomes an A?
Oh, that's not the rare occasion. That's the default, right? Because that's the thing about venture-backed companies. And this is, I think, the reason I actually, a lot of people ask me, oh, do I want to run a venture-backed startup? And the answer is probably not. Unless there's something you are just burning and dying to bring into the world that, that like nobody else is doing, it's an extremely risky venture. So if you get seed funded, for example, 80% of those companies won't even make it to the next round, much less pay out at the end. But that's from the perspective of capital, that makes sense because 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 make it, but the return on that 1 in 10 is like 100x, right? They buy stock at the seed companies, those seed VC firms buy stock at a price of $10 million, and then it exits for $1 billion. Well, great, you got 100x return on one of your 10 investments, so you've 10x your money in 5 years. Well, everyone would take that. You have to be a good venture capitalist to pick the right ones. But what it means for the rest of us who actually found the companies, even if you get to that point that you've taken on a couple $1 million at a $10 million valuation, there's a 9 in 10 chance that you will fail. And you have to be willing to take that risk because it is important enough to you to bring into the world the thing that you want to bring into the world and bring it in quickly. Rather than if what you're looking to do is use a small business to, for example, like have a comfortable retirement, pay for your kids' college, buy a nice house, right? Stuff like that. Like don't miss, there's a good argument to say, don't mess with a working thing. If you have, and there are certain kinds of products and we can talk about this if you want, there are certain kinds of products and services that are well tailored to a venture-backed approach. And one of them is deep technology that requires a ton of money to make happen. But once it happens, everyone could buy it. And, and you could make billions and billions of dollars. Amazon Web Services is a good example of this. They just happen to be backed by Amazon rather than a venture capitalist. And there are certain kinds of companies where it doesn't make sense to try to venture back them because you don't have a good story for yourself of how I'm going to take millions of dollars inject it into this company quickly and turn that company into something that could sell billions and billions of dollars, that has a comparative advantage that is so big that thousands and thousands and thousands of companies are going to want to pay big bucks for your service. And then there's consumer companies, which is a whole different kettle of fish.
Wow. So let me ask you this, right? So what's the relationship like with your VCs that you have involved? Because there's always a lot of chatter about VCs and founders not getting along.
The thing I'll start by saying is, of course, most founders are going to say, "Oh, of course we get along with our VCs," right? Because you don't want to show disunity ever. So showing disunity. So every founder will always tell you we get along great with our VCs, and so do we. But I do want to talk because it's because showing that disunity it's a bad signal to the market. It's a bad signal to future VCs. But a little real talk for the audience now, which is slightly reckless, but I'm just going to go for it, is VC founder relationships are always great as long as things are going well, as long as the growth, as long as that J curve is a J curve and not the A. But the thing is, almost every company goes through the A at some point. Goes through like the J curve is looking up and then right, something goes terribly wrong. And this is the thing about the venture-backed mindset, is that you have to think about everything you're doing as like a daring experiment. You have to contain it, but it's daring. Whereas, and each move you make with the company, each new, when you're trying to sell, you try to increase price, it's a daring experiment. You try to roll out a new feature, you're investing money, it's a daring experiment. Is it going to return? Is it going to return in terms of revenue growth for us? And so almost every company will go through the wrong direction at some point. My fiance happens to work at a company that didn't. Like they founded in 2017. They're a multi-billion-dollar company now, right? Less than 5 years later, everything's gone great for them, as far as you can tell from the outside. And so everyone will always be happy, hunky-dory. The real test of a relationship for a founding team and an investor team is what happens when things go wrong. And it requires, this is actually there's game theory here. It requires both sides to be cooperators rather than defectors in the game theory. Both sides, in Prisoner's Dilemma, if both cooperate, that's the best outcome for everybody. If one of them defects, things start getting hairy. And cooperation rather than defection, we know this from political science, requires vulnerability. It requires exposing yourself, putting yourself at risk. Think of, for example, ending a civil war, right? You want to end a civil war, one side really has to be the one that's willing to say, look, we'll stop here, right? It could potentially give you a military advantage in this war, but we're willing to stop. And so I think that the path to a great relationship with your venture capitalists, if you're a founder, is radical transparency about what's going on. Even if they're going to freak out, even if they're going to yell and scream, you need to not be afraid of that, because at the end of the day, they can yell and scream all they want, but too bad. At some point, you've taken on enough capital that the board can get rid of you. But by then, you've established relationships where you guys are already a team. So you want to do that early. And so that's, for us, has been the path of having a great relationship with our VCs, is being radically transparent and opening them up to helping us make decisions and making sure that we do make decisions with consensus, because we're running the company. Like us and one of our venture capitalists, we're the company. We are the directors. And as long as they feel like they're included, as long as they feel like they really know what's going on and they feel they're really included in the decision-making process, you're going to have a good relationship, even when things are ugly, even when you do have to make tough decisions, which we've had to do in the past.
Coming from a founder's point of view, right, it has to be tough to go and ask the VC or tell him things are going wrong and ask for more money when things are going wrong, because you're not his only horse in the race. There's 8, 9, 10, 15, 100 other ones out there that he might just cut his losses with. So you got to take the mindset from that equation too. It has to be extremely difficult. It's kind of like you moving out of your house and having to go ask your parents if you can move back in again.
Yeah. so it is like that. And it's one of the things about, especially earlier stage companies, like our company's only 40 people. We're a Series A company. So we've only raised, I mean, it's public information. We've raised like $26 million of capital.
Congratulations.
Well, yeah, thanks. But I mean, my fiance's company just raised $250 million, and that's their 5th round of funding, right? So they've raised hundreds of millions. And so so what it means for when you're an early company, there is, yes, they have a bunch of other horses in the race, but they have money in reserve because they know this happens. Like, good VCs know that stuff goes wrong. And one of the things they're looking for is a good founding team, good executives who have a good head on their shoulders, who can, and what you need to do is you need to come to the VCs and be like, this would be the plan with the money. This is the experiment we want to run. This is our hypothesis. So if you give us another couple $1 million, we're going to do this with it. And we're going to find out if it turns the company into, turns a rock star or not. And it's a little like poker. You bet on the pot, right? So it doesn't, in poker, one of the things you have to learn is it doesn't matter how much money you've put in already. It's in the pot. It's gone. And so with the hand you have and what's on the table, is it worth putting, do you fold or do you call, right? And it depends how much money you're being asked to put down, how big the pot is, and what the situation, what your hand looks like compared, and so the same rules apply. And so as a founder, going to your VC and saying, hey, I want you to bet again on this pot, requires having a conversation about why you believe you've got a good hand, even though things didn't go the way you expected before. What did you learn? What are you going to do differently? How do you contain this hypothesis, this experiment, in a way such that the bet isn't going to just become a money leak, like a money pit? And if you can do that, your VC is very likely to invest in you because, again, they already own 20% of your company. And so if they only need to spend a couple million on you to keep that 20% from evaporating, whereas they would need to spend 10 or 15 on another company to acquire that 20% in the first place, it's a better bet if they are equally confident that you can turn it into a good return. It's just like investing in customer success, right? What's the cheapest money to acquire? The money you already have. What's the cheapest revenue to acquire? It's the revenue you already have. Same goes for the VC.
Erik, where's the next phase of your experiment with ProdPerfect? What's in store for us?
Great question. So for our customers, what we're doing, so our big move next is, we have the reason I like talking about AWS, Amazon Web Services, is we believe that the future of testing is similar to what AWS did to IT, right? So it used to be the case that, if you worked in a company, they had an IT server room, right? Or a bunch of them. And there were IT people who worked on them. You literally walked in there, it's like, right? And it's loud and it's hot. And that's going the way of the dodo. You don't have a separate team that independently manages custom infrastructure anymore. If you're a software company, you just buy it. You buy it either from Amazon or Google or Microsoft, but you just buy it. AWS was the innovator there. They changed the market. We believe that testing is going the same way. Rather than hiring a separate testing team, you're just going to buy testing. You plug it in, it just works. It requires, unlike AWS, which required a lot of money and smarts, it requires money, smarts, and a lot of machine learning in order to make it work, because it has to be customized to each platform. I'm not the tech guy, so I only understand that part so much. But what's coming next for us, what's interesting, is we're actually expanding our tool set to allow current engineering teams to actually have more power and control over what our engine produces, right? So our original thing met our vision really well, where we are totally autonomous. We know what to test. Our tests just show up and you run them, and you make sure that you didn't break something in your application. That's what these tests do. They make sure you didn't break checkout, you didn't break login, something like that. And so our original product was just fully autonomous, plug it in, don't think about it. Turns out a lot of people want to think about it. And so what we learned is we actually need to meet a lot of our customers where they are, right? About 10% of the market is ready to just say like, great, I don't want to have to think about this again. It's such a disaster. Your methodology makes sense. We like it. Here's some money. You worry about testing. But a lot of our customers, or a lot of potential customers, love the idea of getting the support of using data and using machine learning to understand what to test and to do some of the heavy lifting, but they still want some control. And even if we think they're wrong to want this control, sometimes in order to win the market, you have to meet people where they are. So in the AWS world, AWS didn't build the bridge product. A whole ecosystem built the bridge. There's a whole ecosystem of digital transformation, of hybrid, right? Some on-prem, some in the cloud, right? There's all these ways to take a journey between where you are now with your server room and AWS totally in the cloud. And you don't have to just buy it and burn down everything you have right now. Turns out that takes time. It's a managed process. And so we have to roll out a product in order for us to penetrate the enterprise and really expand the market that we can go after. We have to ourselves build that bridge, build that way for teams who do their own testing right now to get a big benefit from us today and be able to take that long journey over to fully autonomous testing rather than just ask them to burn everything down and start from scratch with us.
So what's next? What's on the agenda for Erik himself? We already got 2 books under our belt. We got the podcast, a media company, a venture-backed company. What's 3 or 4.0 look like for you?
I've actually been thinking about this a lot recently. One of the big lessons I think from running a venture-backed startup is early on it was really bad for my health, in part because I kind of decided like I had to make this thing work no matter what. And it's actually possible that that decision, and I know a lot of small business owners believe this, I have to work 80 hours a week personally to make this happen, right? Whether it's a laundromat or a restaurant or a law firm or a venture-backed startup, there comes a point, the whole point of having a business is at some point, the financial case to have a business is at some point, you get an efficiency out of it. You get an efficient return on your time at some point, right? If you don't, then you should have just had a job because you could probably make more money at the job. And again, this is just the financial case. There's a lot of heart that goes into these businesses. But I've been starting to think about the financial case, and at what point do I get a return, a more efficient return on my time? At what point do I start taking myself out of the day-to-day operations of the business so that I can focus on the next thing for ProdPerfect and for myself? Do I have to run sales anymore? Well, no, I should be able to hire, like we've done it enough. I should be able to hire someone to run sales and do a better job than me because that's their focus. What I've been investing in more recently is doing less stuff myself and getting more people on my team, or either getting my current team or getting new people on the team to run the core of the business. And my job is really to coach them. And so this is like giving me more free time to think about my health and think about my social connections. But the big thing, this is going to be the first time I've actually ever talked about this in public. So this is an exclusive for the Liquid Lunch project. The thing I really actually want to get back to, not shockingly, is politics. But I want to start at a deeper root cause than just trying to beat the American public back into getting along is not going to work. I actually think I hinted at this. I think the biggest issue, and there's a great book called Coming Apart and another great one called Bowling Alone, which are both worth reading if you want to see Erik Fogg's vision of, or if you want to see what Erik Fogg thinks is the root cause of our balkanization. But there's been a loosening of social cohesion in the United States. We don't have bowling leagues anymore. The thing that in the Northeast and the Midwest, the thing that really used to bind people together was stuff like church. Now, it's not the case that I necessarily want to get Americans back to church, but I want to get Americans back to spending time with each other. And the current vision I have for that is, for everyone who went to college, the best part of college wasn't the classes necessarily. It was like, there were all these clubs, including a cappella groups and the chess club, and there was sports, and people got up to shenanigans, right? And you'd be up late talking about really interesting ideas with your peers. And part of me thinks, why does that have to end in college? Why don't adults have clubs? Why don't adults have a cappella groups. Now some do, but very few. Most people live these very isolated lives. I think that's a problem. And I think it's a problem I want to fix. I have no idea how, but that's the thing I'm excited about. Is like, can we take the thing that everybody loved about college, which is like being in proximity to all these interesting people and doing all this interesting stuff that that you love, with people that you're learning from and developing relationships with. Like, people talk about, oh, it's hard to find friends after college. Well, it doesn't have to be, right? We can recreate the best part of that. It doesn't have to be this like 4-year stint in your life where like, okay, well, now I'm an adult and like life gets boring and, and mundane, right? And I just work until I die. I think there's more to life. And I want to spend a lot of time thinking about how do we get the stuff that like makes us happiest and makes us our best versions of ourselves more into our lives. And I really think that is other people. It's not more technology, it's people.
So Erik, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, on what social channels, how they can get in touch with you, how they can go out and look at your books, and where to buy them?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So there's sort of like two angles you can take on what Erik Fogg thinks about the world. One of them is about technology and startups, and one of them is about politics. And I kind of keep these separate as much as possible because like the audiences are not really the same. So let's talk technology first. Start on my LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/IN/Erik Fogg, ERIKFOGG. You can also search for ProdPerfect, PRODPERFECT, ProdPerfect on LinkedIn. And you'll be able to find me and see my thoughts as they come out. ProdPerfect has a blog where I talk a lot about, I and my co-founder, Dan, we talk a lot about, in particular, work culture, which is the thing, as you could probably tell, like people are what interests me a lot more than technology. And work culture is my real passion in the business. In particular, how do we create an organization where people are vulnerable, where people are deeply enthusiastic about each other and willing to be authentic, rather than playing politics and being, defectors in this game theory hell? How do we get people to all be cooperators? How do we get people to give, to just lean in rather than try to like minimize their effort and minimize their risk? So I have a lot of blogs about that in culture, and we also talk about where I think the technology world is going. The sort of like SaaS, deep tech, software development world is going. So LinkedIn is the place for that. Find Erik Fogg or go to prodperfect.com and find our blog. For politics, Reconsider is my podcast. I've been talking a lot about Ukraine recently. I just like pulled out my old, I almost went to the CIA, so I pulled out my old like tank counting skills. And I've been like trying to help people better understand what's going on in Ukraine. But I usually talk about political polarization and kind of what's going on and how it's affecting you personally. So the Reconsider podcast on Spotify or iTunes or whatever. Reconsidermedia.com is where this stuff gets posted. And then the book that you're going to be most interested in if you like politics is called Wedged. So on Amazon, under books, search Wedged, because if you just search Wedged, you'll get Wedged shoes. But if under books you search Wedged, you'll find us. And the other book that I helped write is called Stop Guessing. And this is a project with a consultant who helped me in the Rust Belt. Or actually, he was my boss, but who I worked with fixing factories in the Rust Belt. And Stop Guessing is all about solving problems in your business more effectively. Tough technical problems like, why is this milk machine broken? We can't figure it out. Those are the two places. Those are the routes to go down if you want to learn more about what Erik Fogg thinks about the world.
I think a lot of folks out there are going to be going to your website, going to get your books, because you were definitely an amazing guest, and thank you for being on. One question we ask everybody on the show before you go: what does success look like to Mr. Erik Fogg?
Yeah, I thought about this a lot before I joined the show, before I decided to come on today, and I have a two-part answer. For me personally, freedom, and what I mean by that is freedom to choose how I engage the world. And that's part of what motivates me about this tech startup, is having a financial exit that gives me the freedom to choose what am I going to do next. I think like a lot of people have been talking about reforming their relationship with work. I've decided that rather than wait for the world to give it to me, I decided I would go create create the wealth I need to then be able to say, okay, what do I want to do this year? Who do I want to work with? And not worry about paying the bills, this month. And so freedom is part of success, but then what do I do with that freedom? For me, my rule for my notion of success is what I call the pavement rule. And the pavement rule is this. We could die at any moment, right? There's this like old Roman Stoic idea that got revived in the Renaissance called memento mori, remember that you will die. And so like you had, Renaissance painters have like skulls in their self-portraits, kind of like the skulls like sitting on a table in the self-portrait. And the whole point is to remind them that death is hanging over us and we don't know when it's going to come. There's this Buddhist concept of impermanence where anything we build is going to turn to dust someday, right? I love this poem by Shelley called Ozymandias, where everyone's heard this quote where, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. The poem ends with, nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. And so everything we build will ultimately turn to dust someday. And so what makes a life worth living? It's hard to say. There's a lot of philosophy about this, but my rule for myself is, since death is going to come at me unexpectedly, probably, or it could, my rule is, the reason I call it the pavement rule is I might get hit by a bus and be bleeding out on the pavement. And I want to live a life where in that moment on the pavement, when like my consciousness is seeping away, I look back at it all and say, did I live it well? How we answer that is, I think, entirely up to ourselves individually. For me, it involves like a life rich with people and increasing the richness of life for other people. But knowing that I could get hit by a bus today, did I live each day well? And did I live it as richly as I could? And so that's what I see as success. I'm not going to wait. I don't want to wait for the future to define my success, because I can't, because death could strike at me tomorrow. And so I don't want to be in that moment and say, if only I'd eked out a few more years, I could have been successful, but now my life is gone. I want to live every day knowing that I lived that day successfully.
Erik Fogg, thank you, sir. That was a very well thought out, probably the most well thought out answer we had so far. But my man, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks again. And guys, that's a wrap of another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.